When an avoidant truly loves, it doesn't look like the movies. It doesn't come wrapped in open affection, consistent communication, or grand romantic gestures. It comes through tension, through silence, hesitation, and an emotional tug of war happening inside their chest. Because for the avoidant, love is not the beginning of safety. It's the beginning of exposure. It's not comfort they feel when they fall in love. It's chaos. You see, avoidants were trained, consciously or unconsciously, to equate closeness with danger. Somewhere in their emotional history, love meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant pain. So they built a system within themselves, a fortress made of independence, logic, and emotional control, where no one could truly touch them. It's their protection. It's how they've survived. But when they meet someone who penetrates that wall, when they encounter love that feels different, patient, deep, and non-judgmental, their system starts to collapse. And that collapse terrifies them, because now they're faced with something that doesn't fit the blueprint their mind has lived by. Their instinct is to retreat, not because they don't care, but because caring feels dangerous. It threatens their control. It awakens emotions they've buried for years, emotions that once brought them pain. Imagine someone who has lived their whole life underwater. It's quiet, it's controlled, it's predictable, and suddenly love pulls them to the surface. They can't breathe. The air is too real, too raw, too intense. That's what true love feels like for the avoidant. Overwhelming. Not because it's wrong, but because it's real. And when something real enters the life of someone who's used to emotional distance, the mind begins to sabotage. The avoidant brain says, pull back before it's too late. Don't get used to this. You'll lose it. You'll get hurt. So they disappear, they detach, they go cold. But that's not rejection, that's protection. They're not trying to hurt you, they're trying to survive the intensity of their own feelings. Here's the paradox that most people miss. When an avoidant loves deeply, it's often the first time they've ever been in love consciously. Their previous connections might have been built on control or curiosity, but true love, the kind that confronts their fear and awakens their humanity, that's foreign territory. It forces them to feel emotions they don't yet have the tools to handle. It pushes them toward growth they didn't sign up for, and that's why they act in contradictions. They want you near, but they push you away. They crave connection, but they retreat into silence. They long for intimacy, yet fear the very thing that would bring it. It's not that they don't love. It's that they love too deeply for their nervous system to handle. You can always tell when an avoidant truly loves because they begin to wrestle with themselves. They start questioning their own patterns. They become uncomfortable in the emotional armor they once proudly wore. They may not know how to express it, but you'll feel it in their eyes, in their hesitation, in the small, almost invisible moments where they let the walls down, even for a second. That moment, that brief opening, is sacred because it means the avoidant is no longer fighting you, they're fighting themselves. And if they ever win that internal battle, if they ever learn that love doesn't mean losing power, but sharing it, that's when you'll see the real transformation. That's when avoidance becomes awareness. Love doesn't heal an avoidant. Awareness does. The moment they realize that emotional safety isn't the absence of pain, but the presence of truth, that's when love begins to rewire them. So if you're dealing with an avoidant who truly loves you, remember this: the chaos you see in them isn't rejection. It's awakening. Their distance is not the death of the connection. It's the battlefield where their old self and their emerging self are colliding. And sometimes, love doesn't need to be chased, forced, or explained. It just needs to be understood. Because for the avoidant, understanding is love. When an avoidant truly loves, their fear is proof, not of weakness, but of awakening. And the most powerful thing you can do is not demand their closeness, but inspire their courage. When an avoidant truly loves, Their silence transforms into a battlefield. From the outside, it looks cold, indifferent, almost cruel. But inside, something far more intense is happening. That silence isn't absence. It's not rejection. It's war. It's the clash between two powerful forces, the fear of intimacy and the desire for connection. And when those two collide, you don't get peace. You get withdrawal. The avoidant disappears not because they've stopped feeling, but because they're feeling too much. Their mind can't make sense of the contradiction. I want you, but I can't handle what you make me feel. For someone with an avoidant attachment pattern, love doesn't just trigger attraction, it triggers survival instincts. Their nervous system interprets closeness as danger. So instead of leaning in, they retreat. It's their way of regaining control in a situation that makes them feel powerless. And this is what most people misunderstand. They think silence means apathy. But for the avoidant, silence is self-preservation. It's the emotional equivalent of pulling their hand away from a flame. They don't realize that what they're pulling away from isn't pain. It's transformation. Because love, for them, represents something much bigger than connection. It represents surrender. Avoidants equate vulnerability with loss of self. They've built their identity around being emotionally independent, self-sufficient, untouchable. Love threatens that identity. It says, you can't stay hidden anymore. You have to be seen. And that terrifies them, because being seen means being at risk. Risk of rejection, risk of loss, risk of being dependent on someone else. So when they start to truly love, their mind turns against their heart. The same emotions that pull them toward you also drive them to escape you. This is why an avoidant silence is so deceptive. It's not that they're ignoring you. It's that they're consumed by what they feel for you. Every text they don't send is overthought 100 times. Every pause, every delay is filled with inner dialogue, arguments between fear and longing. What if I open up and get hurt again? What if they leave once they see who I really am? What if I need them too much? That's the soundtrack playing in their head. So they vanish, they detach, they appear emotionally numb. But the truth is, they're not numb, they're flooded. And the only way they know how to deal with emotional flooding is to retreat into silence until they can regulate again. And here's the paradox: that silence, that withdrawal, is not the absence of love. It's the evidence of it. Because an avoidant only goes silent like that when they're emotionally activated, when they care so much that it overwhelms their capacity to cope. If you meant nothing to them, they'd feel calm. They'd stay distant and indifferent. But if you triggered their silence, it means you touched something real. You disrupted their equilibrium. You became significant. Love forces the avoidant to face the one thing they've avoided their entire life: themselves. Their silence is not about punishing you. It's about surviving the internal chaos that love awakens. And often, the quieter they get, the deeper their emotional struggle becomes. They're not escaping you. They're hiding from the mirror that love is holding up to them. And here's the deeper truth. Silence isn't just a coping mechanism. It's also a form of communication. It says, I don't know how to handle this. I don't trust what I'm feeling. I need space to make sense of this intensity. It's clumsy, it's frustrating, but it's real. Their silence is their version of saying, this matters too much. The tragedy is, many people misinterpret that silence and chase harder, which only reinforces the avoidant's fear that love equals suffocation. What the avoidant truly needs in that silence is not pursuit, but presence. They need to feel that your love isn't conditional upon their comfort level. They need to experience safety, not pressure. Because silence doesn't heal them, safety does. The moment they sense that they can love without losing themselves, that's when they start to remerge. That's when silence turns into communication again. And that's when love begins to feel less like a threat and more like a choice. So, if you're facing the silence of an avoidant who truly loves you, Don't take it as abandonment. Take it as a sign that you've reached a depth in them that few ever touch. You've awakened a war they didn't even know existed between the part of them that wants to run and the part that's dying to stay. Because when an avoidant truly loves, their silence isn't the end of connection. It's the sound of transformation beginning. When an avoidant truly loves, they don't love loudly. They love quietly, almost invisibly. Their affection hides in the shadows, behind observation, behind the need to feel safe while still staying close enough to you to feel your energy. They won't say, "I miss you." They'll watch your stories, check your posts, linger in the digital spaces where your presence still exists. They won't tell you what they feel, but they'll study you like a language they're trying to learn. Every pause, every tone, every change in your energy. Because for the avoidant, love isn't expressed through words. It's observed, analyzed, and protected in silence. Avoidants are watchers by nature. They grew up needing to understand emotions from a distance. They learned to survive by reading people, not trusting them. So, when they truly love you, that pattern doesn't disappear. It deepens. They begin to observe you not just to protect themselves, but because they're emotionally invested. They want to understand you, but they're terrified of being seen themselves. So they watch from a distance, trying to decode your intentions while keeping their own hidden. This is why you'll feel their energy even when they're gone. You'll sense their presence in ways that logic can't explain. Because when an avoidant is in love, their attention doesn't disappear. It transforms into silent observation. They'll replay moments in their head, trying to make sense of why they felt so safe with you and why that safety scared them so much. They'll overanalyze what you said, how you said it, and whether your love was real or conditional. Their silence is not forgetfulness. It's reflection. And here's what's fascinating about that. When they love you deeply, their instinct isn't to perform. It's to understand. They don't chase validation. They crave comprehension. They want to know who you are beyond appearances, beyond emotion, beyond the mask, because that's how they connect, through understanding, not expression. But what they don't realize is that their observation often replaces participation. They end up living love as a spectator sport, watching instead of playing, analyzing instead of feeling. That's the avoidance paradox. They feel more than they can handle, so they try to think their way through what can only be felt. They intellectualize love to avoid surrendering to it. They'll think about you when they should call you. They'll read your messages a dozen times, but won't respond. They'll watch your life unfold like a movie they can't pause. And yet, they won't step onto the stage. Because the moment they do, they risk losing control. This silent observation is how they stay connected without feeling consumed. It gives them the illusion of closeness without the risk of intimacy. But what's happening beneath the surface is far more profound. It's a battle between the head and the heart. The mind says, stay safe. Keep watching. Don't expose yourself. But the heart whispers, you're already exposed. You love them. And if you pay attention, you'll notice the signs. The avoidant who once seemed detached will start mirroring you, subtly, quietly. They'll pick up your phrases, your habits, your rhythm. They'll remember details you forgot you ever shared. That's love in their language. It's hidden in the shadows of behavior. Because for them, observation is intimacy. Watching you is how they stay close without risking rejection. But here's the truth they eventually face. Love can't survive in observation alone. It demands participation. The longer they stay in the shadows, the more disconnected they feel from the very thing they desire most. Because you can't feel the warmth of something you only watch from a distance. True connection requires exposure, and exposure terrifies them. But love has a way of pulling even the most guarded hearts into the light. And this is the breaking point for most avoidants. The longer they watch, the more they realize they're not just observing you. They're longing for you. The watching becomes painful. The silence becomes unbearable. And that's when they start to shift, not because you chase them, but because they can't bear to live in observation anymore. Love demands more than attention. It demands courage. So if an avoidant is watching you, don't mistake it for disinterest. It's evidence of something deeper. A silent attachment forming beneath the surface, one they don't yet know how to express. They may not say it, but they feel it. They may not reach out, but they miss you. Because when an avoidant truly loves, watching you becomes both their comfort and their torment. And eventually, that quiet observation becomes the very thing that drives them back into your light. When an avoidant truly loves, they don't announce it. They don't confess it in emotional outbursts or grand romantic declarations. They work on it. Quietly, privately, relentlessly. You won't see it happening, but beneath their silence, something profound is shifting. Because love for an avoidant is not just an emotion. It's a confrontation with everything inside them that has spent a lifetime running from intimacy. When an avoidant begins to love deeply, they begin to self-audit. They start questioning their patterns. They begin to notice the way they withdraw when someone gets close, the way they sabotage peace just to maintain control, the way they confuse safety with distance. It's not that they suddenly become self-aware overnight. It's that love forces awareness upon them. The connection awakens something they didn't expect, a desire to be better. But they won't tell you that. They'll do it in secret. Because avoidants equate vulnerability with exposure, and exposure with danger. So they'll go underground with their transformation. You won't see the late night journaling. You won't see the self-help podcasts, the quiet therapy sessions, the pages of notes on emotional regulation. They won't text you and say, "I'm trying to heal." They'll just do it. Because for them, love isn't a conversation. It's a private commitment to become someone who doesn't destroy the very thing they want. And that's the irony. Avoidants don't change for people they like. They only begin to change for people they love. Because love is the one emotion strong enough to expose the truth that their emotional detachment isn't strength, it's fear. That their independence isn't power, it's protection. That their silence isn't peace, it's avoidance of pain. True love becomes a mirror that shows them what's missing, what's wounded, and what must evolve. But this transformation is not glamorous. It's brutal. Because healing for an avoidant means dismantling the armor that's kept them safe their entire life. It means re-experiencing the emotions they've spent years suppressing. The abandonment, the shame, the fear of needing someone. They don't just fall in love with you. They fall into battle with themselves. And that internal war doesn't happen in front of anyone's eyes. It happens in solitude, behind closed doors, in the quiet hours when they're alone with their thoughts. This is why their growth often goes unnoticed. People assume the avoidant doesn't care because they can't see the work being done. But that's the misunderstanding. Their transformation is invisible because it's happening internally where they feel safest. They're not rehearsing what to say to win you back. They're confronting why they pushed you away in the first place. And that's not manipulation. That's awakening. Love forces the avoidant to realize that the person they need to stop running from isn't you. It's themselves. Because every pattern of avoidance originates from one root fear, the fear of emotional dependency. To heal, they must face that dependency and learn that needing connection doesn't mean losing control. It means becoming human again. And when an avoidant truly loves, they start doing the work not just to have love, but to deserve it. That's why you'll often feel a shift long before you hear it. Their energy changes. Their silence becomes more introspective, less defensive. Their distance feels purposeful rather than punishing. That's not emotional neglect. That's metamorphosis. They're trying to reconcile the person they've been with the person love is calling them to become. The beauty of it is that avoidance, once they awaken, are some of the most loyal lovers you'll ever meet because they've fought to earn their capacity to love. They've wrestled with their demons in silence. They've broken their own patterns to show up differently. And that's not an easy battle. That's the kind of transformation that costs ego, pride, and the illusion of control. So when they come back, they don't come back seeking comfort. They come back seeking alignment. They want to prove to themselves that they can love without losing themselves. And that's when you know it's real. Because love that drives a person to heal, to grow, to evolve, that's not infatuation. That's revolution. When an avoidant truly loves, they don't just change their behavior. They rebuild their identity. Because love, for them, isn't found in words or gestures. It's found in the silent commitment to become someone who can finally stay. When an avoidant truly loves, they don't just withdraw, they test. Not to manipulate, not to play games, but to measure safety. You see, love doesn't come naturally to someone who's learned that closeness equals pain. For the avoidant, intimacy feels like standing on the edge of a cliff, thrilling but terrifying. So before they leap, they test the ground. They want to know, if I show you my weakness, will you weaponize it? If I disappear, will you chase me or respect my space? If I open my heart, will you protect it or punish it? These aren't conscious strategies. They're emotional defense mechanisms built through years of experience where love meant loss and trust meant betrayal. When an avoidant falls in love, their mind becomes a risk assessment lab. They start evaluating everything: your tone, your reactions, your consistency. Every small interaction becomes data. If you stay calm when they pull away, it registers as safety. If you explode or beg, it confirms their deepest fear, that love will always demand their surrender. That's why their testing looks like distance, silence, or emotional coldness. It's not cruelty, it's calculation. They're asking a silent question. Can I trust you with the parts of me I've never shown anyone? This is where most relationships with avoidance break down. Because people misread the test. They see withdrawal as disinterest. They take silence as rejection. They chase harder, thinking closeness will fix it. But to the avoidant, that pursuit feels like suffocation. It proves that emotional intensity will always outweigh emotional safety. And so, they retreat even further, reinforcing their belief that love is dangerous. But when you understand what's really happening beneath that behavior, the entire dynamic changes. You stop taking their silence personally. You stop chasing validation from someone whose very system is terrified of dependence. And instead, you offer the one thing that disarms an avoidant completely: emotional neutrality. Because when an avoidant truly loves, what they crave most isn't passion, it's peace. They need to know they can come close without being consumed. They need to know that your love isn't a trap, it's a choice. And when they sense that, when they feel that your presence doesn't demand, it invites, that's when their defenses begin to melt. Testing, at its core, is their way of asking for reassurance without words. They'll create distance to see if you'll stay steady. They'll delay responses to see if you'll spiral or stay centered. They'll show you their worst moods to see if your respect for them changes. Every action says, can I still be loved when I'm not perfect? When I'm distant? When I'm scared? It's almost tragic when you think about it, how much emotional pain sits beneath their calm surface. Because behind every test is fear. Behind every retreat is longing. Behind every silence is a child still waiting to find out if love can survive their imperfections. And when you pass those tests, not by reacting, but by remaining grounded, something incredible happens. They start to rewire their understanding of intimacy. They begin to realize that love doesn't have to mean danger, that closeness doesn't have to destroy individuality, and that connection can actually feel safe. You become, in essence, the proof that their old story about love was wrong. But that proof doesn't come through words, it comes through consistency. It's not about convincing them, it's about showing them. When your emotional state doesn't collapse every time they pull away, they begin to relax into your energy. When they see that you can give them space without resentment, they begin to